Yeah, it's more like how can I be creating the most amount of art possible and still get
Yeah,
paid?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's mostly about the art and all about the painting and stuff. Like,
yeah,
how can I paint the most, do the most painting, be more painting?
yeah. Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Eben here. I'm joining you from the great outdoors here. I'm taking a little time this weekend to do a bit of camping, spending some time outside, and taking a bit of a break from the desk work for a little bit. But anyway, for today's chat, I wanted to introduce you guys, if you aren't already familiar with him and his work, to Sam Perin, or you might know him on Instagram or ArtStation as ZBotC. So I discovered Sam through Instagram, and I've just really been enjoying his work. And I've just loved the way he's approached his illustrations, the style of his artwork, the amount of detail and sort of expressiveness with the color and with all the shape language he uses. So I've been checking out his art for a while, and I thought it would be really cool to just sit down with him and actually have a chat and learn a little bit about his process and where the artwork comes from and what kind of strategies he uses to create the work that I've been really enjoying so much. So please subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit that bell so you don't miss new videos when I release them here on my YouTube channel. Okay, enjoy the chat. Hey there.
How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good.
For people that are watching who haven't heard of you, once again, like I've just kind of discovered your stuff, but I've been really loving what I've been seeing, and it sounds like you've been doing the concept and illustration stuff for a while, and you've done some stuff for Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering, which are like kind of the gold standards for a lot of the work people are trying to do these days. So I guess for my first question would be like, what has been your background? Like, how long have you been practicing art, and how long have you been doing art professionally, and what's that been like?
Yeah. So I've been practicing art for a really long time. But I was never like super serious about it. It was always kind of a hobby.
Hmm.
I started probably in middle school. That's when I got more serious, like as a hobby.
Hmm.
And I took classes in high school and middle school and learned from an artist in my hometown. And then in college, when all that pressure on you to figure out your career and figure out your life path and figure out everything you need to do with your life in 4 years, I
Yeah.
decided that I wanted to commit to the art thing. So I got super serious about it, and that's when I started really honing in on the craft and the skills. Um, and then for about the last 2 years, I've been working professionally.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like you've done a lot in that time. I mean, like, I don't know, I've like keep seeing your stuff pop up on like Instagram. I'm like, man, how does this guy not have like 40,000 followers? Like, it's just, it's a really cool style, and it's really high quality. I mean, that's part of like, I saw that and I was like, man, like, I feel like this guy's about to just completely blow up. And I should probably I should probably get into conversation with him before he's like too big for to do that.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. So like, what was your experience like, or has your experience been like, sort of transitioning from something that was just like a hobby or something you were just kind of working on in the background for a while, to something that you would consider to be like a way to make a living?
That's a good question. I would say it's definitely different. So like your relationship, or at least my relationship with art changed because it was really a big passion of mine, but then it became what pays the bills and also what is my job and what is my life every day.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it kind of changes your relationship with art in a way where I am still super passionate about it, but I also know that it's my job and I have responsibilities to fulfill a certain quality level and a certain like by specific deadlines for clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it kind of makes you think about the craft in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the transition was a good experience overall. It required a lot of like how to think as a professional artist rather than thinking as a hobbyist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I put in my portfolio to get a job? How do I actualize my skills in a way that is something I enjoy, but is also something that put me in a position that could be potentially viable in the industry?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of learning how to navigate that and learning how to use the skills that I have and learn more skills to get the jobs that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to explain it.
Yeah. What was your experience with like your very first kind of like paid piece?
Mm. Um, my first paid piece was a commission I did for a company called Kobold Press.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really nervous when I did it because it was like my first industry gig ever. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm still in college. I'm doing this like Kobold Press piece. But it was a good experience. I definitely learned a lot from that first commission, like signing contracts.
Yeah.
I had to start thinking about like how taxes work. And you learn a lot just from working with an art director. A guy named Mark Radels, the art director over there. He's a cool guy. But you learn a lot about like how to take feedback, how to do a piece of work that is not necessarily for your own purposes, but to help another project.
Yeah.
And work on a team.
Yeah. Those are skills that they don't necessarily, I guess, teach you in college. Or I should ask too, like, did you study art at all in college, or were you working on something else at the time?
So I got a major in illustration and concept art.
Nice.
I went to a state university, but the university had the ability to design your own major.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go down that path and make my own major. So I took a lot of like fine art classes and learned a lot of like specific fine art skills. I did a lot of independent studies where I took things like Schoolsism or read a bunch of books about art theory. And then I also took some game design classes and helped students realize their game designs through concept art and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I learned a lot about teamwork in college, and I learned a lot about art skill, like art theory.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think a lot of the business aspect of it was kind of learned more from doing professional work. And you kind of, or I at least learned as I went.
Yeah. No, I had a very similar experience. I studied art at a liberal arts college, and I didn't know they didn't do anything digitally, so it was all like traditional kind of oil painting and ceramics and that kind of stuff. And I guess I would have loved to have, or I guess if I'd thought of it at the time, I would have probably preferred to study like business or self-marketing or something, at least on the side, because like to me those are the skills that end up making a huge difference. I mean, like your portfolio is first, obviously, like you have to be able to make quality work, but yeah, I mean, like the past 3 years for me have just been kind of like very quickly trying to pick up those skills of self-marketing and of like agreements and things you're negotiating with clients and how to find new clients and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We had a few like art for business classes,
Mm-hmm.
or business for art classes,
right.
at our school. I took one of them, but it was useful if you wanted to go into fine art, but there was nothing industry related in it.
Yeah.
So I feel like I didn't really get a lot specific out of it that was applicable to the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I totally get what you mean. I think that I've always said that being an artist, especially if you're a freelancer or you do independent work, it's kind of like half being an artist and half being a business person.
Yeah.
You like have to know how to market yourself and navigate the space, but you also have to still not lose that like childhood creativity.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember. I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently, and I remember at least a couple of people saying, at some point in my life when I was like, oh, I might want to become an artist, and said something along the lines of like, don't make your passion your career or something, or it was like, um, basically they would basically say like, yeah, like you love art and art is fun and it's a great way to be creative and stuff, but once you start trying to make money from it, you can sort of like lose that, and like it becomes very difficult because now this thing that you loved is you're using to pay the bills and stuff, and like I think there may be some truth to that depending upon who you are and how you go about it. But like I guess for me, like I've always been able to approach it very sort of analytically and as a craft, and not like my I guess kind of remain a little bit emotionally detached from it, and maybe that's sort of been helpful in pursuing it as a career. And I guess my question is like, do you feel that your relationship with art has changed throughout all this, or do you feel that you approach it differently, or feel differently about the creative process now that you're doing it professionally?
Yeah. So kind of like what I was talking about before, I think that it's definitely changed in the aspect that I think about it more as a professional practice. Like I'm making paintings to perform a function
Mm.
for a specific product. And my job is to like meet stakeholder needs and make sure that I am able to create the best version of that product that I can, and fulfill like what the brief says and what they're looking for. But I also still think there's a very personal aspect and emotional aspect to it. And I haven't lost my passion for it. If anything, I think my passion's grown because now I'm doing it every day, all day. And I'm really getting to like dive deep into what it means to be an artist and the specific things that I want to look at in art, like different rendering techniques, different like um, I'm really into art theory, so I
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
like dive deep into art theory. So getting to do it every day is really cool because I get to think about that stuff a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's changed in the aspect that I think about it like a professional now, where I'm aware and considerate of what I'm doing as a freelancer
Mm-hmm.
for clients, but I also think that my passion has always remained and stayed the same
Yeah.
throughout the process. Yeah. But I definitely, I've heard that thing too, where people are like, don't make your passion your career.
Right.
And I feel really mixed about that because I think it, I think it kind of depends like how someone's personal passion is for the whatever they're thinking about making a career.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes you can think you're passionate about something, but then when you have a bunch of pressure put on yourself, that passion might disappear and be overshadowed by the pressure.
Mm.
I think you kind of have to think about it in a specific way and kind of like compartmentalize it a little bit. And I also think maybe you have to have like a really strong passion for it, where it's like, this is what I must do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean, and I feel like almost I would say like the worst parts about doing it professionally are actually just like when you're not making the art, and like for me like doing most of that day where I'm just like, actually I mean I really enjoy that too, but like I'll spend 4 or 5 hours just creating content and like or like making a video or emailing people or whatever it is, and I start to feel a little bit burned out, and then I'm like, oh yeah, like my job is to make art, and I start and I start doing that, and I just get I get into it for like 4 or 5 hours, and the more I do that, the better. Yeah, the more I love it, and like your whole perception starts to change, right? Like the more time you spend in that space, you start to notice interesting things like in the world around you, and you start to like understand in kind of a weird way how like the world works, and like like one thing for whatever reason, I've just been like super into clouds recently, and I've been painting them a lot, and just walking around, and I can't like look away from them. I'm just like just trying to figure out exactly how light is working in this really strange system, and like sometimes it doesn't make intuitive sense, but it's just like the way it is. Yeah, I really enjoy how it kind of affects your perception like that as well.
Yeah, it's like immersive learning.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the main sources of inspiration you have for your art? Like when you need to think of new ideas, or just like in terms of your general aesthetic. I mean, I know it's very like fantasy oriented. It tends to be very colorful, and like there's a lot of really wonderful lighting stuff. And I just wonder like where does a lot of the inspiration for that come from?
Mm. Um, Honestly, it comes from a lot of places, like a bunch of different places, because I like a lot of different types of media. I'm not really very picky with what I watch, or read or consume in any way. So uh, it's kind of hard to answer. A lot of it's very random. Like I really like the Souls-like games,
Mm-hmm.
so like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne. So I get a lot of inspiration from those. I get inspiration from Pokemon and different things that I played as a kid. Um, I get inspiration from like different movies and shows. Skyrim's another big inspiration for
Oh
me. I
yeah.
used to play that a ton. I've probably put hundreds of hours into that game.
Yeah, no, I was real into that back in the day as well. It's it's a good one.
Oh, it's so good. Did you mod it?
No, I never got that far into it. I guess I was a purist.
I really got into mods. I think
Mhm.
at one point I had like 300 mods on it. I
Wow.
was like obsessed with the mods that added new worlds that you could explore.
Oh, cool.
So like those ones that where they add like other provinces and stuff. I
Yeah.
always thought those were super cool.
Yeah.
So I always played with those. Um, but yeah, it's really just a bunch of things. Uh, just fantasy, sci-fi. I really like unique and niche things,
Hmm.
things that are like not always along like the mainstream beaten path.
Yeah.
I like things when someone does something that puts a twist on the genre.
Yeah.
So I'm inspired a lot by stuff like that. Um, yeah, just a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then like for my artwork itself, I think that my biggest inspiration is other artists and other people that have walked this path before. I just get really inspired by listening to what other artists have to say and learning about their craft and learning about what they've done or what they're doing. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that, like I think what a lot of people love to learn about is sort of like, I don't know, like what like a typical day looks like for somebody who's doing this kind of work. So I was wondering, like, from the time you get up to when you go to bed, in terms of like an average day, or like any strategies you have for, I guess, remaining productive and on task and stuff. Like, what does a day in your life as an artist usually look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, well, to an outsider looking at it, it's probably not very exciting. But but basically, I opted to make a schedule for myself that I try to follow, which is like get up at a certain time and then work throughout the day till a certain time. Usually I work until about 7 p.m. every day, and then I clock out for the night and just chill for the rest of the night after that. But I think the schedule that I've set has really helped with staying on task and staying not necessarily motivated, but just staying on time with things.
Hmm.
Being able to like treat it kind of like I'm going to a place and doing a job somewhere. So yeah, so I have the schedule, and then the day to day is pretty much I wake up, I go for a run, do whatever I need to do in the morning, eat breakfast, and then I sit down on my iPad and I do emails, I do client outreach, I do just like art discussions, whatever I need to do in the morning that's like talking to people that's not art.
Hmm.
And then after I'm done with that, I pretty much just draw until 7 p.m. every day.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's really just a lot of sitting there and drawing all day.
And no lunch breaks. You're just like plowing right through.
Yeah, I don't eat lunch. I eat a big breakfast and then I eat dinner.
Yeah.
And then I take breaks in the middle. Like sometimes I'll take 15-minute breaks and like walk around for a little bit.
Right.
Or play with our dog or something. But yeah, usually I just try to plow through. I know that's just how my brain works. It's just a lot easier for me to sit down and single track work on a thing for a long time.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely like, if I'm like super engaged, I can do that for, you know, probably 4 hours or something. But I definitely need breaks.
Yeah,
like getting up and walking around and stuff. Yeah, definitely walks are really helpful, especially if I'm like stuck on a particular problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think like getting time away from the piece can really help. Because sometimes like I'll have pieces that aren't going well. I'm like, oh gosh, this is not going great. But then I'll let it sit overnight, and then I come back to it the next morning with fresh eyes, and I'm like, okay, this needs to be fixed, and that's kind of like helps you recenter yourself.
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you about your process. We can, and feel free to get as in depth and nerdy as you want with the art theory and everything. I would love to know more about like your process and like how you would like construct a painting from start to finish, or like, you know, any kind of strategies you use to make your work.
Yeah, so the very first thing that I do when I start a piece is I always do visual research. So I'm looking for reference photos, I'm looking for things that are poses that I want, different types of styles that I want, different reference photos for textures and materials, pretty much just anything I would need to understand the three-dimensional like visual space I want, but also anything I need to establish the mood and the emotion and the feeling that I'm going for. And usually I get a whole bunch of different ideas for different compositions, and I put them all in a folder and like label it whatever the painting is, and then I use those to start making thumbnails. And then with my thumbnail step, I usually do like 3 or 4 thumbnails. Sometimes it changes depending on the painting, but I usually do about 3 to 4, sometimes more. And that they're usually just very quick. And my primary like mode of thinking during that time is the emotional impact of the painting and also the read. So I'm thinking about what story is it telling, what emotion is it giving off, if it's a contract piece, is it fulfilling the needs of the brief? And then I'm also thinking about establishing the basic geometry for the three-dimensional space of the piece. So it's kind of like those 3 big things with big shapes, big colors, big values. And then I get those all blocked in and I look at them and I decide which one I like. And then, or if it's a client work, I send it to the client and they decide which one they like.
Yeah.
So then after that, once a direction is selected, I usually move forward with a detailed sketch. And I work out all of the like 3D shapes and the geometry, and I make everything kind of like work in the space with accurate perspective and everything. And then after that, I move to like a color blocking step, but it's kind of a step, but not exactly, because I kind of change it depending on the painting. But usually I'll blocking like basic colors, and then sometimes I'll go straight to rendering and I'll like render a face and leave the rest of the painting unrendered. Or sometimes I'll equally render the piece like throughout it and kind of go back and forth between different things. But yeah, after that, it's just rendering and like fixing colors, doing like shape corrections, figuring out the brush work. And then after that, the piece is done.
Do you ever use like any photo texturing or like 3D stuff, or is it all just more like kind of traditional painting style?
Yeah, I pretty much never photo bash or use 3D. There's a few instances where I use 3D. I don't like model anything, but I do occasionally use like really, really basic 3D like shapes
Mm-hmm.
to figure out like spatial relationship between stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't use it super often. Mostly, I just draw stuff like by hand or from scratch.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. I mean, like, I guess you hear a lot these days that like to have an extensive knowledge of like those kinds of programs is kind of almost essential for a lot of the work.
Mm.
But in your experience, you've found that it hasn't been needed or like required of you by any of these jobs.
Not for the places that I work,
Yeah.
but I think that it really depends on the studio,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it also depends on like personal preference. Um, I I feel like using 3D and photo bashing is just another tool
Right.
that you can opt to use if you want to or not use if you don't want to. I think at the end of the day, it really comes a lot more down to your skills
Right.
and how you're able to render, how you're able to make a finalized product. But the road to getting there doesn't really matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely think in concept art specifically, because it's so fast paced and because some studios have a really high demand for like fast output, um, I think that photo bashing specifically can be very useful for the process. Um, and also, like a lot of times 3D, it can be used like as a concept artist, you might be given a 3D model as a gray box,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to draw on top of it. That's a pretty common thing that I've seen around. So it kind of just depends. Like there will be instances where you'll have to draw over 3D. There will be times where you might feel pressure that you need to photo bash. But I don't necessarily think you have to do it for everything you do. I think it's more just a tool you use to do the job in a timely manner if you need to,
Right.
or if you want to.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to ask about your professional experience thus far, and of course, you don't have to throw anyone under the bus or name names, but I'm just curious about your what your experience has been. If you've had like good, bad clients, if you've had people request like way too many revisions or something, or if you've ever encountered any issues, and like sort of how you went about dealing with that.
Mm. I would say overall my professional experience has been pretty good in that regard. I don't really think I've ever run into anyone that I would be like, oh, they were a bad art director, or they were. Everyone has been pretty fair, in my opinion, and I feel like a lot of art directors are very willing to work with you, and it's a much more like they direct it, but it's also kind of collaborative. Um, so I don't really have a lot to say in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that everything's been pretty chill. I think chill is the biggest word that I have.
Wow.
It's been chill.
That's great. Yeah.
When you're first starting in the industry, you might run into contracts that don't pay very well,
Mm-hmm.
or that don't have the best rates. I think that's really the only thing that I personally have run into in the past. But um, I don't know. There's a lot of clients out there that also do not do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like just navigating the space, figuring out what works for you, and honing in on the clients that work for your needs as an individual.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, what would you, for people that are just like maybe currently more hobbyists, or maybe they're just starting to get into doing concept art or illustration professionally, do you have any advice or any suggestions that you would give to people in that position, in terms of like how to get those jobs, how to navigate like things like contracts and stuff, how to price your work, or just how to like improve your portfolio, and get your stuff out there?
Yeah, I think that the biggest piece of advice I would give people would be about portfolios specifically. And what I would say about that is make sure that when you're applying to companies and you're going out to get these jobs, you have a portfolio that meets stakeholder needs. And what I mean by that is make sure that your portfolio is fulfilling a real need for the company you're applying for. Um, so, like, what I mean by that is if you're applying for a concept art position at EA for like Call of Duty or something,
Mm-hmm.
um, don't go applying with a bunch of anime drawings in your portfolio. Don't apply with riot art in your portfolio. Don't apply with like apply with realistic, maybe photo bashed soldier characters that have lots of design language and really hone in on the IP. Don't like just yeah, don't go gung ho with it. Make sure that your portfolio fits a niche in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like a specific niche. It could be a general niche. So like um, sci-fi shooter characters,
Mm-hmm.
or fantasy illustration, or like stylized game art. So then like you're getting into Blizzard and Riot and all of those places. But yeah, definitely make sure that what is in your portfolio is representative of not just what you're interested in as a person, but also what is actually useful to a company
Mm-hmm.
and what they're really looking for. Because everything we do is so forward facing. Our portfolio is always there. They can always see it. So if you're applying with a portfolio to a company that doesn't represent what that company does or stands for or needs, they're going to look at that and then turn the other way
Mm-hmm.
because they're looking for people that can already do the job.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You basically need to prove that you can already do the job before you do the job.
Do you find that that they are more inclined to hire people that are specializing? Like, I guess, a question I hear a lot is like there's so many different things to do. Like, there are characters, there are environments, there's fantasy, there's sci-fi, there's props, there's vehicles, all this kind of stuff. Like, I think people get overwhelmed with like, do I need to do all of this? Do I need to specialize? Like, is it, would you say it's better for people to like, specialize in something really specific and then only apply to those jobs that kind of fit that niche, or have or to be more of a generalist and kind of like do a lot of different stuff?
I think that is a really hard question.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I would say that it's really personal preference. And I think it depends on the studio and what the studio is looking for. So I would advocate personally for specialization in certain in broader niches.
Mm-hmm.
So like not specializing in props specifically, but maybe specializing in like general hard surface design and environmental stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because personally, I think if you have a broader range of things that you do and you do them well, then you're putting a better foot forward, that you're showing that you can provide different functions for the client. You don't just do props. You don't just do characters. You do characters and creatures. You do vehicles, props, and environments. As for the jobs, I honestly don't know. I can't answer that question because every studio is different and every studio kind of has like different ways that they have concept art departments work. So some of them might have specialized departments where you're mostly doing props or you're mostly doing skins. But then other ones you might get to the studio and then have to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very contextual.
Yeah, definitely. I do think though that whatever you put in your portfolio will be the work that you will most likely get. So like for me, I have a lot of character and creature illustrations in my portfolio. And 99% of the work that I do is character and creature illustrations.
Mm-hmm.
So there is like, I think that there is an effect of putting things in your portfolio and you'll get the work that it shows off. But I'm not sure that super like hyper specific specialization is necessarily the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, whatever you like doing, keep doing that, but don't try to get a job that doesn't call for it. Essentially, like do your thing. But if you really like creating like fantasy landscape art, don't expect to get a job working at a Call of Duty title, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like if you really like doing props, for instance, it's even maybe sometimes a little more specific. I think the biggest like separation is character versus environment. I think that I've seen that the most, where there's like separate departments for character skin design and then separate for like environment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, pretty much that. Like if you have a bunch of environments in your portfolio, no one's going to hire you to do character designs.
Right.
Because they don't know that you can do them. Mm-hmm. Like you could be amazing at them, but because they're not in your portfolio, no one knows.
Right. What are your goals as an artist, and where would you like to be in 5 years or 10 years?
Oh my gosh.
Like what's your dream situation?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of think about that a little bit, but I'm kind of more just wanting to go with the flow and just paint every day. Like my biggest goal is to just paint every day. Mm-hmm. So I really don't know. I do a bunch of different things. I'm planning to like eventually probably start some sort of independent thing with like a personal series. And I've been dabbling a little bit in like game design. So I thought it might be fun. A friend of mine and I might make a game at some point. But I'm just kind of open to wherever it takes me and just see where it goes. Yeah. The main goal is just to paint every day.
That's great. I love that, man. And I think that's a great attitude. That's probably served you well so far, and I'm sure it will continue to do so. It's just like staying in the process and in the painting and not thinking about what you're going to be doing next year or next week or whatever.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I definitely, like, I do think about the future, and I plan for things and think about like what, where I might want to be with my career or jobs or this or that, but it's kind of a lot more, it's more loose in a way, where I'm kind of like, I'm not necessarily saying like, oh, I'm going to be making this amount of money doing this amount of things at this specific date. Right. It's not really like that.
Yeah, it's more like how can I be creating the most amount of art possible and still get paid?
Yeah. It's mostly about the art and all about the painting and stuff. Like, how can I paint the most, do the most painting, be more painting?
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Cool. Yeah. Well, before I let you go here, I wanted to ask if there's, if people are looking to follow your stuff or check out your artwork or, anything you're working on right now, where would you direct them?
I would say just check out my Instagram and Twitter. They're Zbotka, Zbotc. I don't even know how to pronounce it. It was an old username that my dad came up with when I was younger.
Nice.
But it's ZEBOTC. So either Twitter, Instagram, just anything really. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And on ArtStation, you're under Sam Perin. That's right.
Yeah. I think that the link is the Zbot link. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that one's under Sam Perin.
Right on. Cool. I mean, that's I would love to continue to chat with you for a while about this stuff, but I can let you get back to your evening. But this was awesome. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me for a bit, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else you create.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.